Hi, welcome to the church. My name is Katrina. I have a question for you. How do you love people who are deemed unlovable by society standards? A few years ago, I was at a local gym and we were doing a community workout. There was a bunch of people there doing the same workout, cheering each other on. And there was a group of men from a local rehab facility there doing the same exact thing. As the night went on, I was talking to some people and there was a comment made about these guys being there. And the comment was basically like, why are these guys here? Why are they even invited? Why do they have to be a part of this activity? And little did this person know that they were actually speaking about my husband, because my husband was a part of this rehab facility. And it just hurt my heart because I'm thinking, well, why wouldn't you want them here? What's the alternative? They're here working out, bettering their health, and yet you don't think that they should be invited? Their alternative is not something that they need to be a part of, so why not have them here working out with us? It reminded me of the story in John chapter 4, the story of the Samaritan woman with Jesus, because back in these days, Jews and Samaritans didn't speak to each other. Samaritans were a mixed race of people, and the Jews looked down upon them for that. Jesus was traveling from Judea to Galilee, and in between Judea and Galilee is the town of Samaria. Well, most Jews, probably all Jews, traveled around the town of Samaria. They took a longer route. They built a road that went all the way around Samaria, so they didn't have to interact with the Samaritan people. But Jesus, being who Jesus is, decided to go take the shorter route and go through the town of Samaria. On the outskirts of town was a well, and he took a break here at the well. Shortly when he got to the well, a woman came up to draw water. Jesus started speaking to this woman, and she was taken back because she knew at this time that Jews and Samaritans didn't speak to each other. But Jesus started speaking to her and asking her for water. And he started talking to her about how he is the living water. Also in verse 16 in chapter 4, Jesus tells this woman, "Go and get your husband." And the woman replied, "Well, I don't have a husband." And Jesus says, "You're right, you don't have a husband, for you have had 5 husbands, and you aren't even married to the man that you are living with now." See, back in these times, the men gave the divorce papers. Women were kind of considered lower class citizens, and they didn't really have a say in a lot of things. They weren't able to be involved in the temple or in some of the Jewish biblical teachings. Only the men did this. And so men gave the divorce papers. Women weren't allowed to leave their husbands for any reasons, but the husbands were allowed to leave the men. So Jesus is telling her, you don't have a husband, and you've been married 5 times. So basically, this woman is deemed unlovable by society's standards. She was probably full of shame and guilt, and that's how the people in her town treated her. See, she was unlovable by society's standards, much like we deem addicts, or maybe homeless people, or even people that are in our lives that have a different view of political issues, or make decisions in their life that we don't agree with. We deem them as unlovable, but that's not the way Jesus saw her. He continues on and tells her the good news, and in a parable sense, he tells her that he is the living water for her. And she is so overwhelmed with this, because how could Jesus know anything about her, anything about the fact that she's been married 5 times? And so she goes back to Samaria, to her town, her little village, and tells the people that she's met the Messiah. See, the Bible doesn't tell us why the woman was married 5 times. We don't know her backstory. We don't know the reason why 5 men gave her divorce papers. And on the flip side, obviously, 5 men deemed her marriage material. So much like the addicts that were involved in the gym that workout that night, we don't know their backstory. All we knew and saw was that they were there trying to get healthy and do something good instead of the alternative. In John chapter 13, verse 34 through 35, Jesus says, "Love each other as I have loved you, and this will prove that you are my disciples." See, that's what we're called to do. We're called to love people the way Jesus loved people. Jesus looked at the Samaritan woman and saw that she was worthy enough to know about him, to know what he would do for her in the future. And that's what we are called to do. We are called to love the people deemed unlovable by society's standards. You know, at least once a week we meet here in this living room and lead a community group. People who may be unlovable by society's standards walk into our front door, and they are loved by every single person in our community group. One of our community group members has told us that he learned how to love because of our community group. It's nothing that my husband and I have done alone, but as a collective whole, we love the people that walk into this living room. Pastor Ernie a few weeks ago had this quote, and he asked us, "When was the last time you considered loving a brother or sister in Christ sacrificially and selflessly as Christ loved you?" I love that quote, and that's awesome, but I'm going to challenge it and push it even further and ask you, when was the last time you considered loving a person deemed unlovable by society's standards sacrificially and selflessly as Christ loved you? How do you love those people that walk this earth, that don't make the right decisions, that have made poor decisions, or even decisions that you just don't even agree with? How do you love those people? Well, Jesus tells us, love each other as I have loved you. Jesus didn't ever pick and choose who he loved. He loved the prostitutes, he loved the tax collectors, he loved the lepers, the people with diseases that society wouldn't even come close to. Jesus actually laid hands and touched those people. So how are you loving people who are deemed unlovable by society's standards? What are you doing about it? I love this quote from Lisa Harper. She is an incredible Bible teacher. And she says, "We don't love people because we feel like they deserve it. We love because while we were still sinners, God loved us." See, none of us are perfect. None of us deserve the love of Christ, yet he gives it to us anyway. And that is exactly what we're called to do. We are called to love each other as Jesus loved us. That will prove that we are his disciples. What is the first step of creating a disciple? Well, in my opinion, it's loving each other. It's inviting people into our home and loving them as Christ loved us. If we can't love people, then in my opinion, we aren't going to do a very good job at making disciples. So what are you doing about it? How are you loving people who are deemed unlovable by society's standards?